we're live. Okay,
Hell
here we
yeah.
go. It's the Geeky Gamer Podcast with your host.
Just ask a politician about live mics.
Fuck it, we'll do it live. I just screwed our YouTube algorithm up so I can say fuck again. And it doesn't really matter. All lowercase letters and Mr. Props bring us the score. Couchfire Media does the art media production as well as Torrible Productions.
We don't actually know what they do.
Does a bunch of other stuff. We have a really good guest tonight, Scott Edwards. I can pronounce his name, unlike last week where it was pretty difficult. I think I nailed it, but Bill.
No, I could not say her name.
Zarina?
No, it's not Zarina. It was
it's a couple.
Catherine. You just want me to say her name.
Gerard.
You just want me to fuck up her name.
It's Catherine.
Wasn't
Gerard.
Faith. If you have trouble with Faith, then I listened to a couple of your shows, but I didn't.
Oh, nice.
If it was somebody I couldn't even write their name, I didn't listen.
Yeah. No, Faith was awesome. Zarina was awesome too.
I'm worried about our buddy in Iran.
Oh yeah, Ali. Ali Khamesh.
Yeah.
Khamesh. Yeah, that dude was awesome.
He was super
awesome.
cool.
Anyway, Scott.
Yo,
you're here. You're here.
Before Scott talks, let me talk just a minute about
please,
Scott. He's been apparently in the business for 40 years. He's a producer of live shows, concerts, TV. He's got like 10 different companies. Apparently, he's worked with Jay Leno, Bob Saget, Dana Carvey, who I've met, Paula Poundstone, Brian Posehn, and Graham Chapman.
Posehn.
Oh, Posehn. Yeah. See, again, not a professional. I don't know. Yeah.
You're just not a linguist.
Not a linguist. Not great with names. This week, we'll do our best to connect comedy with TTRPGs, humor, and video board and other games in general, because this is the Geeky Gamer Podcast.
That's what we do.
And I am a gamer, so I do fit into the format of your podcast. Settle down, people. I know you're excited. It's Scott Edwards. Woo! Thank you. Down and back. All right, that's enough of that crap.
I love that. Is that like a little soundboard or something? What is that?
Yeah.
Oh yeah. It's very... Scott.
Yes.
Who are you?
So just for your audience, and I'll talk slower because they're gamers, but I'm just kidding. I'm a gamer, lifelong gamer, but I'm also a fairly recent, the last 5 years, a podcaster, doing podcasts about things that I love and care about. And that goes back to my history. I'm a lifelong entrepreneur. I started my first company when I was 17. And when I was 24, I opened the country's, that's United States of America's 12th comedy club ever.
Really?
Called Laughs Unlimited, all comedy showroom. I ran it for 21 years. And what Ken was alluding to is I had a chance to work with many, many people that went on to be huge millionaires and celebrities, and I was the lowly club owner and producer. But that included Bob Saget, Dave Coulier, Gary Shandling, Jerry Seinfeld, Jay Leno. I could name drop for hours.
You made them.
Paula Poundstone. Well, some of them I actually did. Brian Posehn, you mentioned, actually got his start at my club. Gary Shandling's first road gig was at my club. Jerry Seinfeld had to cancel. He worked for me for a few years. He had to cancel a show because he got this new series called Seinfeld. And after the first season, he owed me a day. I'm sorry?
Seinfeld is...
I haven't seen it.
Oh. So when you come out from under your rock, there's a show called Seinfeld. But he was really cool. After the first season, he came back and worked for the same money and did a full week. And he's a good stand-up guy and a good stand-up comic. Bum. Oh, wait, I shouldn't have that. Wait a minute, it's here. So that's the short, quick version. It's about an old guy that spent his life making money and losing money through the opening and closing of over a dozen companies. And during that time, my sanity was kept by being a gamer. But I'm not, a D&D guy like you guys and other card games.
We're not D&D.
Sorry?
We don't play D&D.
Oh, you don't? You did? That didn't start you in the card world?
It got me. It got me.
Look, just to give you an idea how bad I am, I have a podcast called "The Confused Orc Is Me" that explains D&D.
That's pretty sweet.
Because I didn't know what I was doing, so I brought in a couple masters, I think they're called, or game masters.
Yeah, black belts.
The three of us talked about D&D, and I learned more about it.
The confused orc is me. Interesting.
Yeah. Yeah, just, that's my big connection to recent gaming. I'm more of a first-person shooter, did a lot of Call of Duty, most of those series, and then I'm a golfer. So when I'm not out in the actual course, I like the Tiger Woods golf series and play those. So, not a hardcore gamer like you guys where you're streaming actual games with a multitude of challenged people. But I know how to turn on an Xbox.
Right. I don't have an Xbox, but I do have a computer, and there seems to be a divide. You've got the console.
I tried a couple computer games, especially first-person shooter, which is my thing, and it was difficult for me. I did do a couple computer games. I'm trying to see if I can remember the names that were strategy games. I like strategy.
Like Command and Conquer or Red Alert.
Yes. Command and Conquer was one of them. Civilization was another. I rocked Civilization when it first came out. Yeah. Then they changed it and upgraded it, and I've been challenged.
Yeah.
But anyway, I tried the computer stuff, but I do better with console gaming, which I know is beneath you two geniuses.
No, it's not really. I mean, consoles, especially nowadays, like it's a different situation. Back in the day, consoles could do their specific thing, and now they're basically just computers that are tailored to play a game.
Yeah, the new Xbox is so quick and so fast, and the graphics have gotten so amazing.
Yeah,
it's incredible. Now, you guys have this great podcast talking about gaming. You had Faith on, where she was a writer and editor of games, very smart person that had a wealth of information. And then you had Zarina, who was I'm going to check my notes. I can't read my notes. Oh, she was an author.
Yeah.
And she's also helped with the stories. My point is, you have a really great podcast about gaming, and you've had some amazing guests that are very strong in gaming. What the hell am I doing here?
We could say the same about you, I think. I think you've got definitely a long lived. You've certainly been around the block, and a few times. I've known a number of different people who've owned clubs. I worked for a guy who got his start having a music club in Colorado, and Nirvana came through there, and all those big fans of the grunge band Pearl Jam.
Right, that era, right?
Of that era went through his.
What's Nirvana?
Went
through his club, and then he became a band manager because of that connection to all those artists.
Is that how he finished his career?
And then a lot of other things happened, and no, I think he finished his career much like all people finish their career, taking care of their parents.
Yes.
Talk about a bad segue. Yeah, so let's talk about aging, especially with the old guy. No, I think it's great. I had this comedy club. I was producing like 10 shows a week. I was the MC, so I did a lot of stage work. I'm not a stand-up comic, but I'm pretty good with the crowd, and my voice does seem to command attention. But because of that club, I opened up additional clubs. I ended up having a chain of them. And then because of the success of stand-up comedy about 1985, 86, I produced a couple TV series based on the club, showcasing some great young talent like we name dropped earlier. And then my hero was Bill Graham, who, if you're into the music world out of San Francisco, California, Bill Graham was the guy behind some of the biggest names in rock and roll music. So I wanted to kind of be like that, but on the comedy thing. So I did a few large sold out concerts, including a couple outdoor concerts where we ended up with over 10, 12,000 people. But I was doing stand-up comedy. But there is, what's nice about your friend's story, my analogy to that is that, you know, when you're in an industry and you start meeting the people, it encourages you to reach out and try different things.
Absolutely. Yeah, and they were associated with Golden Voice, and some of those guys went to jail because they were international drug smugglers. But that's a story for another day.
I got to tell you, Ken, you're the king of segues. All right, now let's talk about drugs.
ADHD is
So, comedy and drugs. I'm sure you've seen it all. Well,
yeah, there was a really. Had clubs in the early 80s. Drugs, especially cocaine, was very popular. I actually had a comic chase me around the green room with a spoon of coke. Come on, pussy, you can do it. Come on, you know. And I'm not a drug guy. One of the reasons I survived those decades is that I drank, but that was because I owned bars. But I didn't ever partake in the drugs. But it was prevalent at the time, and it was part of life. Coincidentally, I'm going to do one of Ken's bad segues. My bride, my wife, is now she's in federal law enforcement on it's called HIDA, high intensity drug traffic enforcement. So she's actually a mucky muck on the anti-drug law enforcement side, which is a far scream for me. Dealing with people doing drugs back in the 80s and 90s. So it's funny how the world turns. We could soap opera.
It's an important turn. I mean, the way that fentanyl and meth.
Fentanyl's scary.
It's just it's an important turn. I mean, I've never done coke, but I certainly know a lot of people who have, and I certainly know that if you go to the Comedy Store or the Laugh Factory or the Improv in Hollywood, you know, I don't know if you know about LA comedy clubs at all, but it seems like it was in that scene, like even when I was around and the aughts and even into the teens. And then I left LA.
Well, just to bring the story together, the reason I opened a comedy club, I was a life insurance agent at age 23, which is not the kind of career you dream of when you're a kid. And because you don't think you're ever going to die, I was selling life insurance. I was somewhat successful, but I went on vacation to LA, and my dad, who had an amazing sense of humor, said, "You got to go to this place. It's in Westwood, just off campus of UCLA. And it was a satellite of the Comedy Store. And I went in there and I saw Sandra Bernhardt, Dave Coulier, and George Wallace. And I was just, and stand-up comedy, your audience has to understand, stand-up comedy wasn't really known at the time. It hadn't hit mainstream entertainment. In fact, stand-up comedy, like Lenny Bruce and those guys, was mostly between jazz clubs, you know, in jazz clubs between jazz bands or between strippers at a strip club. Stand-up comedy wasn't mainstream. So I go to this show and I see this and I go, man, this is freaking amazing. And I immediately drove back to Sacramento, quit my job, went bankrupt, and decided I was going to open a comedy club. So I'm very familiar with the clubs in LA because I spent a lot of time down there and a lot of time at the clubs in San Francisco, like the Holy City Zoo and the Punchline and others. And that's how I met comics. I talked to club owners. I talked to the waitress staff, everybody. And that's how I learned the business. As I mentioned, I've started over a dozen companies. It's always important to do your research first. And just like in the comedy club business, I talked to as many people in the industry as I could, pick their brains, and then I did it myself better.
That's it's quite a story, and it's a different day and age. Like people would go, they would leave their house. I think
I love your subtlety, Ken. Yeah, back then people actually went outside. Unlike gamers today that can get everything, their Uber Eats can bring their food, that they have portable toilets in their game room, they don't have to leave anything. Yeah, back in those days we actually left the house.
Well, there are LARPers. LARPers leave their house. That's where you go to a park somewhere and you dress up. And
See? Now you're educating me, Ken.
But it's not, it's not normal. Those are the people who are really, really into it. I think there are levels where, like, if you're just a gamer, you don't ever leave your house. And then if you like embrace something and are a fan,
well, go to Comic-Con.
Become obsessed about it. You create the costume and you become the entity.
That's what Bill does. He left. So let's talk about him. Bill, I saw him in a principal. He's back.
Oh no.
So you're absolutely correct. When it comes to gaming, I'm on the very veneer level. Games were a escape for me. I would usually keep myself to an hour or two a night. And it was after my wife went to bed, and it would just be a way to not worry about the world, right? You get your headphones on, you're playing your game, you're not thinking about your bills or, what you have to get done the next day or what went bad that day. And what's interesting is I think that podcasts are similar because it gives us a break from all the stuff that's going around, and you can get into the story or the interview or the information being shared on a podcast, and it gives you a break from that everyday life. That might be a thin analogy, but I think that works a little bit. Is it me or did you put on ears? You have antennae now.
Preparing ourselves for transition.
Okay.
Your audio has changed, sir.
Yeah. Yeah. Sounds like he just tightened his shorts. What do you think?
Yeah, I think you were going through your Bluetooth. Yeah.
I got to say, this is the most interesting podcast I've been on, that we have not hit on any one particular subject. We've been all over the place. Ken was just describing Bill and how he dresses up for those out of the house gaming experiences. It's pretty informative, if not entertaining.
Yeah. Well, I think we're definitely on little change mode. I do have some, to keep us in. Well, let's talk about bombing. What do you do if you're bombing on stage and you're a comedian? Do you have some thoughts on that? Because it happens in role-playing games too. Like, you get to a moment and everybody gets awkward.
Yeah. Well, Ken, that was an amazing question. Let me give you the answer. As both an entrepreneur, you learn early on that failures are the stepping stones to success. If you're not failing, you're not trying. And if you're not trying, you're not going to succeed. In comedy, it's the same thing. Every entertainer, from Jay Leno down to Brian Posehn and everybody in between, will tell you that you bomb. Everybody bombs. Everybody has a bad night on stage or a bad set or a bad joke. But it's part of the learning process, and it's getting through those challenges that helps you hone your set, hone your career. We often in the comedy business talk about a joke or a comedy bit as a lump of coal. And unless you work it over and over and over and adjust the words and tighten it, you won't end up with a gem of a joke or a comedy bit. And it takes time, it takes getting on stage, and it includes failure. Was that a good answer, Ken?
Oh, I think that's a wonderful answer. The one of the things that I get most afraid of is when Bill gets up and walks away, and I'm sitting here just by myself with nothing to say, and so that's where I'm like, I know I'm bombing, and I know that I need to get past this,
But that's a little imposter syndrome, Ken, because you know you can do it. You've been doing it for a while. You've had some great interviews. The podcast is a success. You're obviously a successful gamer. You just got to own that. You just have to have the ego and take control of that weakness that you're worried about, and understand that you have the ability, not only because you actually do have it, but because you've done it over and over and over. Right, Bill?
That's correct. So
so
we've got 3 minutes on this meeting.
You're
left.
kidding.
So no.
Okay.
So what we're gonna do?
We're gonna
really quick, Ken. So I went ahead and bought the monthly thing. So I should be able. I was hoping that it was going to continue this meeting, but I have to start a new meeting, which should be.
I feel so guilty, man.
Which
we've been talking about getting Zoom for a while.
Yeah, it should be unlimited, but we're gonna find out. So,
well, before we go, we have a minute. Bill, ask a question.
Ask a question.
Yeah, I feel like I've been owning this conversation. I do have some follow-ups for that last one.
That's okay.
Good job. All right, let's move on.
I'm gonna set up this new meeting, and then I'll send it to you, everybody. Okay.
Okay. And I'll be watching on Podmatch, right?
Yep. It's correct.
I guess goodbye.
Yeah, indeed. We'll be right back.
Okay. But that's why I was doing this other thing. So.
Good. Oh, you're gonna do a thing.
No, I was just gonna make a musical interlude, like the intermission, like halfway through Monty Python kind of thing.
You have 1.5 minutes.
Well, I mean,
I'm ready. I'm so ready.
Hit it.
It's
hit
like
it, right
it can
now.
happen.
Ladies and gentlemen,
I'm hitting it.
We're going to intermission, and Ken is going to play music. Take it away, Ken. gentlemen, we're back.
We're back. This is the paid-for version of Geeky Gamer Podcast. We're going to see how Zoom works. This is the test Zoom. We're going to test.
Only because the old guy you're talking to couldn't figure out Discord.
It's
What's
a long,
Discord?
It's a long time coming, man. We've needed to move away from Discord anyway.
Discord's a pain in the butt.
I got to tell you, ladies and gentlemen, I spent much time and energy trying to get onto Discord. It wasn't Ken or Bill. It was my failure. So now we're on Zoom, where everything is easy.
Sexy. Yeah.
Zoom.
I'm not 100% sure, but I may have not done it right. Like, this is the website. Are you guys on the app or are you on the website?
I'm on the web. I'm on the app.
Yeah, mine comes through my computer. I use Zoom all the time. So
I see.
Yeah.
I see. Well, whatever.
all right.
Cool.
So Ken had a follow-up question. If
Indeed.
we're back running.
Oh, bombing.
2,
I wanted to talk about bombing. Because that's
Ken
something
wants
that
to talk about failure. What's unusual about this? Let's go forward.
how did some so you learn through failure, but you don't. It's not in the moment. You don't. Comics, when they start bombing, have you ever seen somebody kind of pull themselves out of that failure?
Oh no,
and succeed?
That's a great question, Ken, because one of the distinctions between amateurs and pros are that when an amateur hits a bad joke or a bad line or gets a bad response from the audience, they tend to wither and melt and quit. A professional has a bad line or gets a bad reaction from an audience, can easily pivot back to material that they know will always work because they've already used it and honed it. And so a professional, when they hit a bad moment, which they all do, they just pivot to something they know will work. And that's what one of the major differences. As a comedy producer, I only worked with professionals. I did open mic nights. I actually taught stand-up comedy. I've written a couple books on how to be a stand-up comic. I'm an author in that field. But the professionals that I used on my live stage shows, my TV shows, and my concerts were all pros. And so they understand that they're getting paid to entertain a group of people, and that if there is a problem, they have that professional technique to deal with it. And that's another thing. Another example, Ken, would be a heckler. You get an amateur up there and somebody starts to heckle them and they don't know how to respond. But a professional who's done this for years, in most cases, has heard every possible heckle, knows how to deal with it, and doesn't let them distract them. In fact, in many cases, can turn it around and make them the hero of that moment. Does that make sense?
Is that kind of what happened with Michael Richards when he went through bombing? Because that's like the most notable. Like, that guy was in a pretty good place, and then he kind of.
Well,
kind of.
yeah, he's an example of somebody that made a good living, millions of dollars as a comic actor. But when you're a comic actor, you're reading somebody else's lines off a script. And you're also performing to the magic eye of a camera as opposed to a live audience. Now, Seinfeld and many shows actually had a live audience, but they could cut and edit and blah, blah, blah. What's interesting and what I admire about professional stand-up comics that do stage work is that it is in the moment. It is, you have to engage with the audience. You want to share something with them that they relate to. And the energy in the room is palpable to not only the comic, but also to the audience. What's interesting about him was that when he was transitioning from his stage work back into comedy, because he started in comedy, he had some stage years before his acting career, he needed to have that adjustment. We're now seeing the Michael Richards.
Everything.
Yeah, I noticed. I Zoom shares differently than does the.
Yeah, ladies and gentlemen, this is Zoom 101.
Zoom 101. Guess what
Yeah,
happens when you
we're
share?
learning. We're bombing.
But
and learning.
hopefully I've answered your question.
Yeah, I
Michael
think you have.
Richards went from comic acting back to the stage, and he just didn't have his chops. He just didn't have the experience. He'd been away too many years and it's like learning a bicycle. You can do it, but you have to fall a couple times before you get your
and
wheels back.
he started too high. He started.
Oh yeah, because he was already a hero, a star. So they said, okay, Michael Richards, you're going to do an hour set.
Yeah.
That's a long frickin' time on stage. When we do open mics, we tell people, see if you can fill 3 minutes. 3 minutes on stage is a lifetime if you don't know what you're doing. So you're taking this comic actor and you're putting him up and saying, well, you know, we're paying you $20,000. You better do 45 minutes to an hour of material. And the guy hadn't done a set in years. Anyway, he figured it out.
No, and that's what I was saying. When Bill takes off and he leaves me here, just like talking to you, or not you, because you're really good at talking, but you know, anybody. Like last week, I had some awkward moments with our guests, and he's like, "I'm going to take off because this is really good," and I was like, "I have nowhere to go. I couldn't."
You were fine. Listen, if you were digging a hole, that was all on you, dog.
So I like how we keep throwing you under the bus, Bill.
He's getting out. He hasn't talked to me this week, so he's trying to get in there a little bit.
So there's a line. Does comedy has a line?
Move on.
Clearly that was racism with Michael Richard. Is there censorship? Did you censor anybody at your clubs? This is a good question to ask for this moment. Is there anything we should not talk about during this episode?
Yeah. So first off, stand-up comedy is the last bastion of free speech, right? You should be able to say anything you want on stage. And if you offend somebody, but somebody else laughs, that's the expense of the joke. But it is true, especially in this woke society, that you have to be a little more aware, a little bit more tender with the audience than you used to have to be back in my day of the 80s and the 90s, where, you know, came from George Carlin and people like that would say things to push the envelope, to make people think and to kind of shock them into a different way of thinking, but through humor, right? And to answer your question, I never edited my comic entertainers. However, I mentioned I did several large outdoor concerts, and those were for families. So where kids were there. So we did tell the comics, hey, you know, hold off on the F-bombs, stay away from the dick jokes. You're only doing a few minutes, but it's in front of, you know, 5,000 or 10,000 families. So be material appropriate. Now, the only other time and this might be interesting to your audience, is that there's a political comic, Bill Maher, who is world famous. He's a millionaire. He can buy and sell me 100 times. Bill Maher was working my club, and he was out on a quiet Wednesday or Thursday night. I think it was a Thursday night. And he's doing his material, but Bill thinks a lot of himself. And he's a political comic. So he was dropping names of politicians in DC and senators here or there around the country. And the material might have been hilarious, but the audience and he were not on the same page because he was talking about all this highfalutin political stuff. And Bill forgot the main goal of an entertainer, and that's to engage and entertain the audience. It's not about the comic. It's about the audience. Me as a club owner, people are paying me to get entertained, not to get lectured by the likes of Bill Maher. So Bill Maher got halfway through his set. The audience wasn't with him at all. He actually stopped in the middle of his set and said, "You people here in Sacramento are stupid. You don't get any of this." And he walked off stage.
Whoa.
Bill Maher was the only one of only 2 comics in the history, 21 years of shows, that I fired on the spot. I said, here's your check for 2 days. You get your ass out of here. This audience paid to be entertained, and you don't insult my audience because you can't connect with them. And that's my Bill Maher story. He never worked for me again, and he went on to fame and fortune, and I'm here retired.
Right. Well, it's you don't know. I think with the world of Hollywood, you watch people go up, you watch people go down, and when you're kind of like, in the middle, like you just watch people go up and down, and you do your job, you get your money. It's just.
Yeah, I
mean,
mean,
not the rises and lows.
I hope that Bill.
But you know how to navigate the system. You make money. You work in the industry. It's almost kind of a joy for nobody to know who you are. In some ways, I'm not saying that about you. I'm just
exactly. But in the case of Bill Maher, he was obviously a talented guy, and he went on and did very well, and still is. Him and Dennis Miller, their rants are famous, but both those guys worked for me a lot. But Bill that night forgot his role in the contract with the audience, that if they're paying to be entertained, you have to do what you can to entertain. If that means lowering or dumbing down your act, that's what you need to do. Bill and I never chatted after that night. I fired him and kicked him out of the club and sent him home on his way. But I hope that he learned a small lesson in that it is about the audience. And that goes for singers and musicians and anyone that performs, and they're getting paid, especially professionals. They have a responsibility to entertain that audience. And again, whether it's 10 people or 10,000.
Yeah, but with Seinfeld, when he got, I mean, I'm not going to say he was canceled because I don't think he was canceled, but he just said, kind of he's not, I'm not going to put you in the same place as him, but he basically said a few things that he got punished for it, saying that you can't say what you used to be able to say. And do you think that's actually true? Do you believe that? Because he kind of said it earlier. I just want to I want to verify that.
No,
I mean, know your audience, sure.
Right. Know your audience, play to your audience. And what I said earlier is true in this recent society, the last, and one of the reasons I got out of the business in the early 2000s was things were changing, the temperament of the audience, the comics, everything was in adjustment. And especially in the last 5 to 10 years, there's a lot more sensitivity in the audience. Don Rickles is a great example of what you were able to get away with in the 70s and 80s that would have a challenging time in this day and age. But what Seinfeld is, Seinfeld, one of the biggest names in history when it comes to comedy. So yes, he was getting heckled and getting some grief for some of his comments, but he's Seinfeld. And he pretty much said, I'm going to do my job and say what I feel. You don't want to hear it, leave. That's the other thing. I had people customers complain about a comic doing a dick joke or talking about politics or something. And I said, look, here's your money back. Thanks. Maybe you'll try it again sometime. Come back and see a different comic. But I'm not going to tell the comic he can't do what he says because that's free speech. You see that? And you're right. I was on the fence in the middle, having to make sure that on the one side, the entertainer's entertaining the audience, but also I have to respect and support the comics' right to freedom of speech. And if the audience can't handle it, get out of the fire kind of thing, right? Does that make sense?
Yeah, but what about
trying to bring a full circle and make sense?
Dave Chappelle, for instance, he crosses those thresholds, and I'm gonna pull Bill because he's a little more conservative than I am, and I'm a little more liberal. You wouldn't know this.
Bill.
But Dave Chappelle did I think a really wonderful Netflix comedy show where he pushed those thresholds, and he did it in a way that I didn't find offensive. Whereas like when our former president gets on the stage and starts mimicking somebody who is disabled, who is not, is a comedian in his own way, that doesn't really resonate with me. So I'm gonna
interject really quick.
Do it,
Scott. So you're aware, Ken claims that we don't go into politics on this show. Ken always brings it into politics. Every time he's like, anyway, by the way, Trump sucks. Anyway, let's move on. It's every time. Will not stop. I also, for the record, I don't like Donald Trump. But
You don't have to like Donald Trump to know that he'll run the country better.
oh, and we're into politics. Yes!
Oh, no.
Let's go straight in.
But here's the point about Chappelle and these other guys you're talking about, Ken, is that you want to speak to the audience, you want the audience to engage with you, but also there's that balance of free speech from the stage, but also freedom of those people not to come into the club. See what I'm saying? They're choosing to come in and be entertained. For example, if you don't like black comics that have an opinion, you probably shouldn't buy a ticket to go see Dave Chappelle, right? And you can't expect because you bought a $20 ticket to go see Dave Chappelle that he's going to change who he is for you.
No,
I'm trying to bring it down to the
do you think the line of censorship is less for black comics?
No. You brought up Chappelle. I just use him as an example.
No,
the same with
I say that I'm just saying that Seinfeld got flack for just commenting about it. Dave Chappelle went down the rabbit hole, and I felt like his commentary was interesting.
Well, George Carlin did it all the time. Yeah. Now, I'm a lot older than you guys, but I think you guys may have heard
of course Carlin. We know George.
He's famous for going down the rabbit holes and pushing the envelope and stepping on big toes. And if you didn't like Carlin, you just quit watching him. But if you liked and respected that he had an opinion and shared it, even if you didn't agree with everything, then you understood the genius that he brought to the comic stage. But his success was based on, he came from the 60s and 70s. He was anti-establishment, and the establishment didn't like him and tried to censor him or did censor him and did all these things to make it difficult. But he was funny enough and poignant enough and found an audience that pushed him through to success. But every audience, every comic, every situation is different. I've seen comics do the same material and kill on a Thursday night and then bomb on a Friday late show when everybody's drunk and not paying attention, right? It's not even always the material. It could be the person listening, but it could be the material. I mean, that's one of the things, and I don't want to get on a soapbox or anything, but one of the reasons I love stand-up comedy, it is really one of the few art forms that's so personal because it's that comic's material connecting with a different audience, and all those people in the audience, each and every time, each moment on stage is magical, and that'll never happen again. When you're doing music, you're playing the same song over and over and over. When you do TV or a movie, once it's on film, it's never going to change. Stand-up comedy is really the only entertainment format where, I guess you could say magicians are pretty repetitive, but jugglers, I mean, there's different types of ventriloquism. I used to entertain all those types of art forms, but stand-up comedy in particular, each moment is magical in the sense that between the comic and the audience, it'll never happen again. It's like it's there, it either hits or it misses, and then you move on. I mean, I hope I'm not overstating it, but you can't say that about anything else.
Oh, I think the whole, like this whole entire line of questioning is coming from, because I'm a big fan of free speech, and I think stand-up comedy does a lot of those things, and I think these role-playing games, we talk about things that sometimes you can't talk about. There's violence, there's sex, there's a lot of, like, depending on if you go into a darker world.
But what's interesting about role-playing games,
we're allowed to communicate as other people, and we're playing characters. We're not, a stand-up comedy, the comedian is playing themselves, whereas when you're role playing, I play a space Nazi on one of the games, and it's like I do it because I mean that person is the opposite of me, and I want to be able to understand like why or where and not be limited.
There's a therapeutic reason that you do that. But no, I was going to just agree with you that in role-playing games, what's the similarity is that in role-playing games, each and every character and even the games themselves are coming from the minds and imagination of the players. So each and every time it's unique and different, kind of like I was saying about stand-up comedy, right? But then you have somebody like Dana Carvey, who you said you're aware of, who is a terrific stand-up comic, but a lot of people don't know he was a terrific musician, and he could do character voices and impressions. So he was a catch-all kind of entertainer that could play himself, but he could also play somebody else on stage. Does that make sense? So much like your D&D games and other role-playing games, you're only limited by your own imagination. And I think that's exciting, and I think that's why so many people play those games. The podcast that I did, The Confused Orc Is Me, about D&D, The Confused Orc Is Me, available on all platforms. One of the things we try to explain is, why do people play it? What are they getting out of it? And you nailed it, Ken, is that a lot of times the people playing these games want to create characters where they can go and do things they would never do in real life. It's all in their imagination. It's all in their expectations of, what if I was, an orc, what would I do in this situation? And I think that's what makes it so compelling as a game, and why so many people play role-playing games. Notice how we brought it back to gaming? Bill, what would you say? You've been awful quiet again.
It's because I've been steamrolling him.
Yeah, I try to give left. Can need space.
Please. I'm going to mute my mic.
No, Bill, when you're playing role-playing games, because you say you do it as well, and you have this great Monday night game where you created the game and you created the world, and right. the people you play with create characters. It is, as Ken alluded to, somewhat therapeutic, but it's all about using your imagination and going places and doing things that you can't really do, and it allows that freedom of expression that is so important. And in so many things, whether it's television, movies, songs, all the stuff that's scripted by others, that's so limiting, right? Whereas in the gaming world, as in the stand-up comedy world, so there is a correlation there, you have the opportunity to take a topic where you want to take it. Now, will your other players accept that, or will the audience accept that? You never know until you try.
That's a good point. In that regard, I think there's, at the very least, tangential similarities. Because when you're sitting down at a gaming table, whether you're playing Monopoly or you're playing Dungeons and Dragons or some other game, there's an expectation, a mindset, and a goal that people have in mind of just playing the game. For example, maybe as I'm not a stand-up, and I haven't been to a lot of stand-up shows, but I do watch it. As you'd mentioned, when you go to the comedy club, there's a mind space that you kind of have to enter into. And a lot of people miss that mark. It's really easy to. When you're playing a video game, a video game and you get mad at it, if you're like me, you throw the controller, right? Or the mouse. You just, you explode that mouse, right? That bitch, boom. But when you're playing a TTRPG, or with other people, a cooperative storytelling game like Dreadlore, you have lots of people you can yell at, and bitch to, and at, and use as a whipping post.
Right. Well,
and if you get
the therapeutic venting,
there's a difference, though. There's a difference. I'd say the difference, if maybe we can beat this dead horse. have you experienced a situation in a comedy store where the comedian, they're using it for therapy, but the rant or the jokes, it's not just angst, there's like some cruelty behind it. Like they're actually taking out something on the audience versus ranting at the audience and it's funny. Like, is there a divide there?
Yeah, it's happened, but those don't usually succeed or last. So let's say somebody's had a bad day, and so they go up on stage and they're upset about their day. They may take it out on the audience. The audience doesn't respond because they can't relate, because it was his personal experience. It wasn't something that they could relate to. So yeah, he got his venting done, but he lost the audience, and so he won't do it again because he failed to entertain. That doesn't mean it doesn't happen. I'm sure it happens all the time. But interesting analogy to what you were bringing up. I'm a first-person shooter Call of Duty player.
Yeah.
One of my frustrations is that you're kind of forced to just run and shoot, which to me is not the fun part. I like the strategy, and I've tried so hard to interact with other players online, and hey, if we do a sweep around here, we can catch them unawares, and they're just like, no! And just running and shooting, and if they die, they don't care. And
there's no stakes.
Right. So it's frustrating for me as a player because I'm a little more strategic. I want to be a little more mindful. I don't want to just run out and die immediately. I mean, sure, it's going to happen, but I'd like to, as they say, earn it and do something, measurable against that death in the game. And my point of bringing that up is that I'm just one player that has a certain goal or benchmark, but you're playing in a world where there's dozens to hundreds of other people that have their own goals, and it's very difficult to line them up and make them work together.
So you'll have some...
is that just to follow up real fast? Is that you do have communication though on the server, like you're talking back and forth with these people? Do you have a higher expectation of communication? Is basically what you're saying? Is like you want...
I try, because I'm a trier and I have all the gear, and I'm trying to communicate with let's say the 12-member team during a particular game, and more than half of them aren't hooked up in any way audibly. And then the ones that are, it's a 50-50 shot if they're going to be interested in actually working as a team, as a cooperative to get a goal done, versus, no, I just want to, I've actually had guys say, hey, I appreciate where you're coming from, but I just run and gun. I'm here on Call of Duty, which is a low-end thinking game, to run and gun, as opposed to role-playing games where everybody can kind of do their own thing. But I could be wrong, but my understanding of D&D, which is a much lower platform for you guys, there does need to be some cooperation. In other words, we need to go and achieve this goal, and we have to work as a team or we're not going to make it.
You touch it with a pen. And it's not just D&D, it's like, just to name a few, because I cut my teeth on D&D, but Hasbro owns it, and they need no more publicity. Look, I'm not a D&D hater at all, unless it's 4th edition. But like, for real, guys in the universe, come on, like, get off that D&D dick, please. Like, do Pathfinder, any other D20 thing. Well, stop slobbing the D&D knob. It is a massive corporation that owns like military things. Go. Seriously.
I'm incredibly naive. I apologize. I
don't be naive.
Anything about these games. In fact, when I did my podcast about D&D, the Confused Orc is me, the guys I was playing with were D&D masters. But even, one of the things that comes out is that they've taken it, their games far beyond the base.
Yeah, home rules.
I'm sorry?
Home rules.
Yeah, right. They create their own world, they create their own goals, and D&D might be the foundation, but they've moved way beyond it. Now, as far as all these other games, I'm sure they play, but I was, again, a novice just trying to understand. I mean, for example, I couldn't understand or comprehend, when you play Monopoly or slide ladders and slides or whatever, there's an end. And I was one of the big questions, the last episode of the podcast is, how do these games end? And what was interesting, I couldn't get a clear-cut answer. It's kind of like, well, guys go off and do something else, or they start another game, or we did achieve this goal. We could keep going, but we kind of choose not to. And there's no clear-cut end. And that's because in role-playing games, it's all up to the participants or where they want to take it. And since everyone's different, everyone has a different example or definition of what the end is.
Yeah. So as an example, you get into a Call of Duty server and maybe it's capture the flag, right? And so you kind of have to work together if you're going to win, but there's degrees of working together. And exactly. You'll have someone who does the Chuck Norris, like the lone wolf, who just goes off by themselves. They're always going by themselves. Or you'll have the person who just thinks it's really funny to kill their own teammates. Stuff like that.
These idiots that stand in one place and just spin and shoot in the air.
That would be me. But
me too. That's about where I'm at.
The idea, though, is like, even in these games, if you're playing the game and you have different goals in mind, sometimes it can link up and everything's fine, but a lot of times it's not fine. And you get the same argument, whether you're playing a tabletop role-playing game, Cards Against Humanity, whatever it is you want to play. If you're not at the same table, figuratively, it's not going to work. And right. People approach gaming, specifically TTRPGs, and they think that it's one thing. For example, in the stereotypical, the old school, or I should say what gaming has become for a lot of people, it's the show Critical Role, which I don't know if you've heard of Critical Role or not, but it's essentially what made D&D popular to the masses. At any rate,
coffee, Bill, have something to drink.
Yeah, no, I think I know where you're going from, or you're getting to. Are you saying something like? It's funny that you said that, because I was thinking comics should do a role playing game. They would be really good at acting.
Well, that's why a lot of them become actors, Ken, is that when you're going on stage, I'll give you a quick analogy story. When you write material, you want to present it like you just thought of it. But they've actually, as I mentioned, had a lump of coal that turned into a diamond. They've been working that comedy bit, that joke, maybe for months or years. But when they go on stage, they want to present it like they just thought of it, or just, hey, imagine if you were in a plane and this happened, right? They act like it's just coming up, and that's the key word, is they act like. Well, that's why a lot of stand-up comics become actors, is because it's the ability to take something that's either written or you've done 100 times and make it sound fresh and new.
I always thought that stand-up comics became actors because they always wanted to be actors, and stand-up comedy was just a way to act and practice. And I could be wrong about that. I mean, it's about wrong.
I would say it's about 50-50. There's people that got into comedy only to be seen in hopes of being an actor, but there's plenty of people that just love doing stand-up comedy and end up what I call getting the golden ticket and becoming millionaires. Great examples of that are Jerry Seinfeld and Jay Leno. Both these guys are filthy rich. They don't need another dollar. They've had all the success in the world, and yet what are they doing right now? They're both out on tour. Why? Because they love performing to a live audience, getting that instant gratification, that feeling of engagement with a group of strangers that it gives you a sense of accomplishment and a feeling that can't be done on TV or doing a script or something else. And that's why they're back out performing. So every person is different, of course, but you are correct. Some people got into comedy just to be seen and hopefully end up in entertainment, TVs and movies. But there was a lot of comics that were just funny, got seen on the Tonight Show or something, and then were offered a show. In other words, it was kind of something they weren't planning. It just happened. But both have happened. Both ways have accomplished the end result, which is a successful sitcom or movie.
How do we make Bill funnier?
We just need to get Bill to be able to talk without having to drink gallons of water. He's got dry throat syndrome. When you smoke a lot of pot, that happens.
He doesn't smoke any pot. He's like the least. He smokes 0 pot. This guy.
I'm just joking. I think it's funny. Bill is just more interested in what we're saying than as opposed to joining in. I think that he is enjoying the conversation, but as a third party. Bill, we're just poking you. It's called poking the bear.
Indeed. Look.
Indeed. And with that, I have a thought.
There is no bear to poke. Yeah, I don't know what the deal is. I think it's because I drink so much goddamn coffee. Drink a lot of coffee.
Not good for you. Makes you poop a lot too.
What are you talking about?
Iced tea-aholic. I
Coffee's great for
clubs.
You.
Huh?
Coffee's great for you. Builds strong bones and muscles.
There you go. Well, believe it. And I'm an iced tea-aholic. I owned bars and drank my entire life.
Sweet tea?
No, I got to keep it. I do use a lot of tropical flavored drinks because then I don't have to add sugar.
Right.
Trying to avoid that. And I'm not kidding. I mean, I probably drink a gallon or more a day. And that's my caffeine. That's my hit.
Right.
Like a lot of people drink coffee. But the key is we don't have the other bad habits. I mean, we're not doing the drugs or smoking cigarettes or doing the hashish pipes. But everybody, needs something to believe in. And for me, it's tea.
Yeah, right on.
I think tea does a better job than coffee. I mean, I'm drinking beers, so
shut your whore mouth.
I bet we would disagree on beers. I like the porters and the stouts. Ken, what do you drink?
I like as light of beer as I can get.
Yeah,
I like local beer. I like local beer.
Yeah, you like
the least amount of alcohol because then I can drink one and
light
and not
and no calories. I like Harris.
Very light. 4.5%.
I like red ales, specifically Newcastle, and my favorite is Smithwick's.
Ooh,
yeah.
There's one.
And
real popular now are the IPAs, but I don't.
I know, but I was
it's enjoyable.
I was into IPAs when I first started drinking, and
last month.
Yeah, the thing is that it's essentially just juice, and I mean it is. It tastes like juice. It tastes like funky juice, and I kind of stopped drinking them because I took some time off and got into bourbon like a big boy.
Oh yeah,
we're bourbon. We're bourbon people.
We drink nothing but old fashions, but with the best possible alcohol.
Now, what old fashions are you? What do you use?
One of my favorites are Pebble Beach for the LPGA tournament and the Open.
Oh, okay.
And they have a little bar called the Tap House, and they did an old fashioned with banana liqueur and actual banana chips in it. It was amazing.
Okay.
And then there's a restaurant near here that we go to that uses a walnut flavor.
Yeah, walnut will work for sure.
Yeah. And that's pretty exceptional. But again, you have to have Four Roses or Booker's or some really good bourbon.
Jesus Christ, you have Booker's Old Fashions. Okay, that's that golfer old fashioned right there, baby.
Yeah, I don't know
Booker's
about like putting nice bourbon into an old fashioned hurts me a little bit, but
look, if you make
it's just bourbon with a little bit of flavoring. It's still the bourbon.
If you make a real old fashioned,
almost
it's
straight.
all good. It's all good,
yeah.
but
yeah,
the way that people normally make them.
My wife prefers bourbon straight up.
Yeah, I like it neat. I'm a neat fan.
There you go.
Yeah, but you also drink Evan
Give me
Williams.
a bourbon neat in a dirty glass.
Yeah, I like Evan Williams. It's like, where can you go to?
No.
15
Evan Williams is, Jim Beam is in my cupboard for.
Nope.
I do my share of bourbon Coke, which is so teenage, but you just want a quick drink and you don't care about the quality of the bourbon. Jim Beam is a great quality for a good price, and you could put it in Coke and not feel like you've ruined it.
Right.
Yeah. Boy, have we
Jim
gone
Beam
on
and
a
Coke.
few different topics here? Your podcast is usually so, tight. I feel like
No, there's nothing tight here.
No, there's nothing.
last looseness.
Last week we didn't get to what the guest actually did until maybe like 10 minutes before.
But like barely any of it.
Well, speaking of that, we're talking about stand-up comedy, and I'm a podcaster. I do have my main podcast called Stand-Up Comedy, your host and MC, and it's a combination of interviews with people from the industry and actual showcasing comedy sets like Gary Shandling, Bob Saget, Larry Miller, Dana Carvey, some of the people I work with, and it's a lot of fun. The stand-up comedy, host and MC, and they're usually about 40, anywhere from 30 minutes to an hour because of the interviews. But I also, because a lot of people have short attention span syndrome, right, Bill? I have comedy appetizers. That's comedy appetizers, where all the shows are between 5 and 7 minutes, and they're just pure comedy sets by some really funny people. The famous and not so famous.
Right. I listened to a few. I thought it was interesting. Do you? Are these from your club, or where how do you
write TV shows, my concerts, my club? We recorded everything, and I own the rights to the material because
for sure
they signed off and I paid them, and and then the interviews, of course, of the comics and the club owners and the agents and stuff are all industry driven. I'm very focused. I don't do a lot of. I don't do any interviews outside of the industry, where you guys are tapping into different things, which I think is brilliant and helps broaden your audience. All my interviews and all the comedy entertainment is really based on stand-up comedy as an industry. So it's a little more niche.
Well, I think the reason we have such a wide
gaming's really all over the place. You mentioned Monopoly to D&D to
when you create a world, if Bill is gonna have a stand-up comedy section of his, which I think you should role play that at some point, where you get up.
You start a game where you need someone to pretend he's a stand-up comic. I'm there for you, man. I can't be funny, but I can fill the role.
Sometimes it's all you need.
I like low standards. That's perfect.
Sometimes it's all you need. I mean, that's the thing. It's kind of a trope in gaming that, it's like, what character you play, and it's someone who you would rather be. I'm not really into the escapism aspect, but all of my characters, right? They're like fit and really tall and lots of hair.
Well, how about your Nazi friend? I mean, that's a whole other level.
They have a gash across their face, and I'm pretty sure they're sexy as hell, but they're definitely bald.
Because bald is sexy, which is so funny because my wife always admires bald men, and I have a nice full head of gray hair. But
that's unfortunate.
Yeah, I'm sorry you go through that.
Yes, I know, it's horrible.
There's nothing you can do about it either.
It's just sad. But you guys have got a great podcast. You've had some wonderful guests, and I think that especially in this day and age when there's more people, gaming is a way to find their entertainment, find their therapy. I mean, whatever it is for them. It gives them an opportunity to explore their imagination and bring different aspects of who they are out. And the fact that you're doing a podcast or a podcast focusing on that is going to find a nice size audience. And I know you're bringing great information and entertainment to people. Congratulations.
Yeah, appreciate it, man. It's been interesting meeting like all the various people. Podmatch has been pretty cool, but also Ken knows just tons of people from his industry days, and traveling and everything. And yeah, it's interesting how many people are into gaming, or if they're not into gaming, in quotes, it doesn't take much for them to be into gaming. It's because it's a creative process. Like the moment that you start actually flexing that muscle, it feels good to actually create something and, use your brain. And that's sort of the antithesis of gaming is the opposite of that. So when you sit down at the table and everyone wants to be, spoon-fed, you find that a lot with video gamers. Not to diss video gamers, but everything's done. Everything's done for them. So it's like, oh, what's the cinematic? Tell me the story. Spoon feed, shovel it down my face, and then I'm going to save. And I'm always going to win. Because in a video game, the idea is if you plug at it, if you do the grind, you will eventually win. Eventually. And you are rewarded for doing the grind by your cinematics and then a big star at the end or whatever the fuck it is. Whereas in a TTRPG, you're not a fucking snowflake. You might fucking die. There is no winning. And there's also no winning, there's no losing. Like playing the game, being creative, creating something is the point. So people have to switch their mentality a lot.
So from a novice that knows nothing, what do you do when you're starting a game, you're creating characters, and it's human nature, everybody wants to be the hero, or at least a majority.
I would say like
or the anti-hero. I mean, there's people that want to be the villain, but I mean it's usually black or white. There's not a lot of homeless people wandering around gaming rooms.
I think with stand-up, I think with I said stand-up TTRPGs, I think playing a flawed character with some quirks to him, that's what's fun. It's not about being the hero necessarily. Right. It's about exploiting flaws and really enjoying failure. To me, I know a lot of people play to win. Speaking of playing, I think, and if you have a moment for this, I think Bill's a wonderful game master. I think he could run us through a really short random game with a couple of adjectives right now with no prep.
Game masters are so important to the gaming world because, as you just pointed out, it's their linear thinking that can bring a story and create a situation for others to play in.
So do you want to do it?
If you're talking to me, I'm a gamer.
Okay. So let's have a couple questions. Let's see a setting. How about fantasy, or like something like Lord of the Rings, or spacey near future? Think of Star Trek, or Star Wars, or Firefly, or something. Modern film noir. Steampunk. What's your sort of favorite genre?
What about all those are good, but I was going to try to throw a curve at you.
That's fine.
What about the old style kind of detective?
Dick Tracy?
Yeah. Well, maybe a little more serious,
more noir.
More noir. Yeah, but a murder mystery, I think, is always compelling to the audience.
Okay.
It was a dark and stormy night, see?
Yeah, definitely a dark and stormy night. All right, so you two are going to be the players, of course. You're going to be basically Eddie Valiant and his brother who died. I can't remember his brother who died's name. Regardless, it's like Valiant and Valiant, Two-Framed Roger Rabbit. So you're two PIs, right? Or detectives. And you work together. All right, so you need a name. So write down, if you have access to a writing utensil, write down, what is your name? This is going to be one of your traits. This is a character trait, meaning you can use your name to do stuff.
Interesting.
Okay? We need to write down a flaw. So it'd be an adjective of some sort. It could be like a couple words, like falls down a lot, whatever. Like a flaw of some sort. You get your name, you got your flaw, something you're strong at, something you're really good at. Could be comedy, could be guns, could be whatever, something you're strong at. Okay. And the last one that you're going to have is something you do. All right. So this is how it goes. You guys are in your private eye office. So everything's wood. There's a table, big wood. You have like 2 desks. Maybe would you have 2 separate rooms? Would be in the same room?
Well, if we're like Valiant and Valiant, they shared a back-to-back desk so they could share ideas and components to a crime.
I love it. So you guys are back-to-back desks. These huge desks are like, you got them from like a judge or something. You have windows on the back wall. Of course, it's a dark and stormy night. You're in a city, of course. The moon is out. The clouds going over it and whatnot. There's bourbon on the desk. Maybe, what is your name, Scott? What's your character's name?
I am Detective Horace.
Oh, I love it. Horace. Horace, you are over there at the little boutique thing. It's one of those globes that opens up that has all the liquors and such in it. And you're making old fashions for yourself. And what is your name, Ken?
Robert J. Greenwood the Fourth.
Robert.
Bobby for short.
We'll say that you guys are in Chicago. Okay, so you can try to do a Chicago accent if you wish. Right. So, Robert, you are sitting at the desk. You're reviewing this file. It's a file you guys have been working on for a long time, a string of murders. You flip that one over, and underneath, you have some extra PI work that the police have sent off to you. Like missing cats and animals and shit. Maybe you flip that one over. There's like missing jewels, whatever. And you're trying to figure out which case to go into. All right, so in this scene, there's a bathroom too, and like a little washroom. You're on the 2nd floor. There you go. Dingy apartment building. It's brick and such. Lights flicker with the storm and such. What are you guys doing? So what you're going to do is you're going to bid one of your traits, which means you say, I'm going to use my flaw, or I'm going to use whatever the good thing is, or whatever I do, or whatever my name is. And then you change the scene. You describe your character in that scene. So we're going to start with Ken. Or I should say Robert. What do you bid, and what are you doing?
I would like to bid my something I do, which is alcohol tolerance, which having the issue with drinking, I might have a little problem. So I take a nip of the alcohol, and I'm looking at this case file in front of me, and I'm like, this doesn't add up. I don't know what I'm supposed to be doing here. Like the different items, it's like the accounting, it doesn't add up. They're 2 different numbers. I keep on coming to nothing.
And what about you, Horace? As you're sitting there, you finished up your old fashions. What is the trait? What is one of these traits that you bid? And then how do you respond to this? You can change the scene for better or worse, or something in the middle.
So can I just go into it, or have to acknowledge it? Okay.
You can do whatever you want.
So, Bob, would you like some more bourbon? I've noticed while you're looking at the pages that the one in the picture with the upper right corner, it's more flared. I think that's the one you've looked at the most.
Oh, I love it. And what is the trait you bid?
That was stuttering, and then also I have a Sherlock Holmes eye for detail.
I love it. So just one of the traits is all you need to bid.
Oh, I'll bid stuttering.
All right, stuttering. So what that means is you actually put a little tick next to it. It means it's exhausted for right now until the next scene.
Okay.
Right. Okay. So, Bob, as you look down, you see, in fact, Horace is correct. Maybe it's been hidden in plain. It's been hidden in plain sight as you're looking at all the jewels and such, and you realize that all of these cases, they're all connected. Oh my God. You realize, the killer actually is also the thief who's actually been stealing the animals and all these things, and it all makes sense. It's like in your mind's eye, as gong, 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 gong on the door. You guys turn, you look, you see the silhouette of a beautiful woman.
Dun, dun, dun.
It's open.
You see the door rattle as Maybe the door has like it's kind of difficult to open. Like, you know, it's like
You gotta push a little harder. Just give it a knock.
Boom, the door slams open. A woman walks in. She's femme fatale. She's got, let's decide. What does she have? What color hair does she have? Dark red, blonde, none.
Go with
white.
flaming red.
Flaming red.
The sexy color of all intrepid women.
Green eyes, flaming red hair, 1920s style dress with like the little hat. She's carrying a martini because why wouldn't you? And one of those long cigars and a gun. As you realize, Bob, she's the killer as she strolls in with the gun leveled at both of you, back and forth. Ah, I see. It was only a matter of time before you would find me. I figured I would get to you before you got to me. Okay, what are you guys doing?
Well, my character Horace would point at Bob and say he's a bigger target.
What do you bid?
Oh, me? I'm bidding stuttering again.
Well, you've already bid that, so it's exhausted.
Okay.
Get a bid the other.
Okay. I'm sorry. I'll go to another trade. I've never done this before. All right. So I would Horace would point at Bob and say and point out to the shooter that he's a bigger target. You can tell by the details in his jacket, and the fact that he's unbuttoned means that he hasn't fully clothed because of his pleasures in the bedroom last night. So please plug.
As she turns and sees you, Bob, pointing the gun directly at your belly. Bob,
I'm gonna stand slowly. Okay, we know it's you, and it's fine. And I would like to bid attention to detail. And I noticed that the safety on her gun is on.
Very good.
In fact, it's not a revolver. It's a Walter.
Or maybe there's no bullets in the gun. How about
from 20s? As in fact, it's a new style gun that has safeties. And she's like, she doesn't realize it. In fact, the safety is on.
You know,
as you see her go click, click, click. Looking at the gun, questioning. She takes a draft of the martini.
We've deduced it was you the whole time, and I know that it was you and the. And
yes, you said that before. Why won't this gun work?
In the bar, and it was you at the art museum. Which was really wonderful. I was a fan of your art, but I don't
work
know.
She throws the gun down and pulls out a knife. I'll do it the old-fashioned way. As she rushes, come on. As she rushes towards, you're making old fashions, Bob, to stab him in his formidable belly. Okay, so normally we would roll dice at this point. So I'm going to roll dice for you guys. We're going to call high or low, and basically, if it is high, you win. If it's low, you don't, depending on what you call. So, for example, Horace, tell me high or low.
Low.
So that was low, which means you would have won. If it had been high, you would not have. All right. So she's going to stab Bob in the belly with a big knife. What are you doing, Horace, as she's running towards him?
As Horace, now, because I've used my two things, I can't do anything, or how do you decide?
So you have to, as the player, you have to figure out your other traits, how to make them work.
Oh, okay. So Horace would say, don't worry, Bob, that's a theatrical knife. It's not real. So it hits you in the belly, but you're not bleeding.
Okay, and what's the trait you bid?
Oh, that was observation again. But you said
okay, you've exhausted that one, so you got to use a different one.
Well, that's what I was asking. You just come up with more.
So you normally in the game you can get traits from various ways, but in this situation you only have those other two. You can do that action, but your trait colors the action. For example, let's say you had the trait angry. You would try to accomplish this. It would just be done in an angry way. So you're like shouting it. Or you could say, oh, maybe you have your name. Like you're the person who always comes up with things. So you bid your name to find a way out. You're like Captain Kirk. Okay. You don't believe in no-win situations, that kind of thing.
I may be wrong, but I'll give it a shot. I'm going to combine my already stated trait of observation and add some humor and say, but Bob, don't worry. That's a theatrical knife. I noticed by the color, and she's so stupid to try to stab you with that because now she's exposed and close to you. Grab her, Robert.
So this is how we're going to do it. This is a really great place. Normally traits just change the situation. This is going to be opposed or difficult. We're going to see if it actually works or to what degree. As you see her running and a moment of confusion and the oh no in her eyes as she kind of like looks down at the knife to see if it's real or not. Let's find out if it's real. So, Horace, tell me high or low.
Oh, Horace again?
I can roll.
Since it's...
You want me to roll?
Well, yeah, he's getting killed. Maybe he should roll.
I know. I got the dice out. I can roll.
You got the dice?
Oh,
right, I mean,
okay. I'll mix it up and say hi this time.
All right, I'm rolling a D10.
Do it.
And it's 8.
It's an 8. As she looks down and sees the seam of the plastic, and she curses, and throws the dagger down. She's right before you. What are you doing, Bob?
I'm going to embrace her into my arms and hold her tight and say, I knew it was you all along, but I wanted to protect you from the beginning. That's why we didn't figure out the case, and it was stupid of you to even come here. And I'm going to bid my flawed nervous liar to like try to convince her.
As you see her look up into your eyes, it's that tight shot, you know, like the Casablanca shot. All of this, by the way, is in Technicolor. And she looks at you, her hair falls across her face. You move it across her face. I believe you, she says, as you guys go out of focus as you kiss her, and it focuses on Horace in the background with the old fashioned. You take a drink. It's good. Then.
Actually, I think that was a fun and imaginative story. Let's hear it for Bill and Ken. Good job. Incredible. And what Horace was doing in there, we have no idea.
No. You make the drinks.
So that was a short piece of gameplay, and you went to Finn.
Yeah.
Role playing. But other than that, it could have just gone on. And that was one of my questions in my podcast. The Confused Orc is me, is how does it end? Now you just cut it off. But for these guys that play, people like you that like to play for hours, days, weeks, I've heard games go on for years. Yeah. That there doesn't have to be a set ending. The story can adapt and change over time, whether it's an hour or a year.
Yep. So you say something like, I mean, think of like Lord of the Rings, you know, some epic tale, or the Odyssey or the Iliad. You know, where does the story end? It ends when the story of the characters can be buttoned up, or when there's a cliffhanger and you can go to episode 2 or the sequel or the next campaign or whatever.
So Robert finding love was the end of that dramatic crime drama.
Yeah, because this is one of those 1920s, like you go to the theater, you see like 5 of these and a few commercials type things, right? Like it's like a 10-minute little short movie and then there's a Cracker Jack box in the background or whatever.
You have a great imagination, Bill.
Yeah, those little mini things, and that's really fun, you know. But you can also dig in and get into. That was obviously silly, but you can get into a very serious game where you could be playing like a horror game. Lauded, that setting is usually, or that genre is usually the most difficult because everyone at the table has to take it seriously, and that's hard to do.
For me, yeah.
It's hard to do. But you can have You can
Did
have
it
jokes, but you
Right,
gotta take
right.
it seriously.
But
Well,
did it work for you?
But there are funny characters too. They're wild characters that don't necessarily, just like they're wild people. Are given the opportunity to treat your character but you got to be in the same world.
You got to respect the genre. So, for example, in Alien,
the right role. Yeah,
or respect the world that's built. Right? Is that what you're saying?
In Alien,
well, I got to tell you, guys are obviously smart guys. You're having fun in not only gaming but podcasting, and you're bringing entertainment and information to people. My hat's off to you. Congratulations. And the fact that we're able to put together a quick imaginative story. Good job, guys. I was trying to ask Ken if it fulfilled him for the day, because there was no Nazi, so I wanted.
I mean the space Nazi thing, that's a role, that's a character, and I know.
I only bring it up because it's the only role I know you've played. Tell me about your Little Bo Peep role.
I play a drug addict and another one.
All these really strong, positive character roles.
Yeah. Well, I try to play people that I want to understand their perspective more, and I try to do research and
so in your next game, you're going to play a Republican.
Well, I mean, I feel like the space Nazi is my Republican.
There you go. Take it to a political.
Because I want to understand. I want to understand.
Actually, he's right. In that game, the setting, it's into space. It's a near future setting, and it's based off this really shitty book that I wrote. But
nope.
If you've seen Starship Troopers, then you're kind of getting along the right lines. It's fascism.
I like Starship Troopers.
Yeah,
that's great.
So he really, like, everyone in the game was playing, because we just finished it up. Was playing basically a space Nazi, except they don't know it because it's the future, and that's part of the moral dilemma. Is they get out there doing their mission, and they start seeing things that don't line up with what they thought was true. So it's while it's a zany game in a lot of ways, they were able to deal with a lot of interesting political ideas.
Yeah, you bring up a good point in role-playing games, is that it needs to be entertaining, it needs to be fun, but at the same token, you can explore and learn about different other things and on a more serious side. So in that regard, it is a good combination or vehicle for that kind of understanding and learning.
Yeah. Oh, I also think that it was a little bit mean. If you get really far right, you're a little bit left. Does that make sense?
Well, I will say that it's concerning that the people on the extreme right and the extreme left seem to be getting the most airplay, and I think that the majority of people find themselves somewhere in the middle and a little bit more cordial and less strong in those feelings. Less what?
Fanatic.
Right. I mean, life has enough challenges. There's no reason to make it any harder. But hey, that's what gaming and podcasting is all about, being able to explore these things.
Well, check it out. So we got about 5 minutes left. Let's do any follow-up questions, and then we'll give you, Scott, the last word. Ken, you got any questions for Scott?
Why we need a group of comedians to do some role playing? Send us some names. That's my question.
I imagine some of them would be gamers, except that anything in show business requires dedication, and it being an industry that happens mostly at night and weekends, it tends to conflict with most gaming times. But I'm sure that some of the people I interact with are gamers. I just don't know to what extent. It's not a topic that I usually bring up. I'll have to do that.
Yeah, that's good. It's a good idea.
I think it's funny. Well, I mean, the most popular thing on the internet is voice actors who do role playing.
Right.
Oh, really? Oh, that would
Yeah.
be interesting. There's a voice character guy in Florida named Josh, and he can come. He does an amazing Trump. He does a good Biden. He does a few other characters, and I've seen him have conversations between the characters, but I have no awareness. He's a young man. If he's ever used those techniques in gaming, but now I have a question for him, so that's good.
Oh yeah.
Bill.
Anything
Bill,
else?
what is your
Ken?
question?
My question? What's your next project? What's the next thing you have coming up?
It's interesting that you ask. I am actually in a transitional state. I've been doing podcasting for about a little over 5 years. I'm going to start to wind down on that. My latest venture was I'm a grandfather. I created a children's podcast for ages 3 to 8 called Ock's Amazing Adventures. And Ock is, kind of a 6-year-old boy, but he gets to go into space and he gets to meet pirates and he goes to the library. He does mundane things, but also imaginative things. And he shares these 3 to 5 minute stories with sound effects to entertain children. And that's been a really fun from the heart project. But I'm already purposely, and it'll end at the end of the year with I did 3 holiday shows. But to answer your question, the next project has not been decided. This one's just coming to an end. My other podcast will probably continue, but I'm not doing as many new shows. For example, my main podcast, stand-up comedy, host and MC, I'm already at over 300 episodes. So it's not that I have less interest in the subject. I just feel like I may have reached an end. I have to figure that out. It's kind of like a role-playing game. I haven't quite figured out the ending, but I guess my next project is to figure out how to take that next step and move into something unique and different. As an entrepreneur, I've started over a dozen companies, and there was a time when I had the money that I would start a new business every year, whether it was a restaurant, a jazz nightclub, a new comedy club. I had art galleries, produce a big TV show, whatever it was. And now I just retired in December. So I am struggling a little bit with that what's next question.
Right.
But when I figure it out, I'll bring you guys up.
It's definitely a thing. I mean, I haven't retired, I'm a millennial. I probably won't.
Well, you always have to look for the next thing that's going to inspire you. For me, I'm a creative soul. And so, if I had my druthers, I'd open another business. But my wife was pretty specific because we've been through.
Adamant.
We've been pretty well off a couple times, but I've been bankrupt a couple times as well. And my whole life's been a financial roller coaster. And she's kind of done with that. She's been patient for decades. And she said, hey, happy retirement. You can do anything you want, but no employees, no leases, no contracts, right? So she set stipulations that have can kind of framing me and boxing me in a little bit. So I have to find what'll work for both her and me.
Yeah. Well, that's the business. I mean, that's making it in Hollywood. The way I made it in Hollywood was the low overhead. And, you got to know what to invest in and where to.
Right. And what's great about podcasting is that you can reach, I have listeners all over the world. I am more broad as far as worldwide connections today than I've ever been in my life. And yet I've probably spent the least money. I spend a lot of time on it and my time has value, but because I enjoy it, it's worth it. But it isn't always about the financial investment. It's about what you're doing with it and what you get out of it.
But you're getting a lot out of it because clearly you're a historian who has archived some history, and because of what you are doing, there is a record, and we have access to have.
I got to tell you, wait a minute. I got to find the right button. That is the first time I've ever been referred to as an historian, and you might find it insulting, but I find it quite the compliment, because it is true that I do look at my podcast and the interviews and the information and the comedy being shared is historical. It's from the 80s and the 90s mostly. I mean, all the interviews are recent. But one of my takeaways from everything I've done is, and I don't want to make it too simplistic, but funny is funny. In other words, if a joke was really good in 1980, it would still get a laugh today.
Interesting.
Right? Funny is funny. Doesn't matter when it was written.
That's fair enough. That's fair enough. You could say that about stories as well.
Right. You said you were an author. You've done a couple books. What have you done?
Yeah, so I'm about to put out a book called Falling Asleep, which is a short story. It's set in the setting.
When you read it, you fall asleep, and so you'll help with that industry.
Exactly. That's what it's about. It's actually ironically about waking up or being able to fall asleep is what it is. But it's a short story in the world of Craster, which is this fantasy world that is the main setting of the other book I wrote, which is Dreadlore. That is a tabletop role-playing game that has a big setting.
That was your game on Mondays, or?
Yeah, it's the one we just played, actually.
Oh, okay. Congratulations. That's great. You're doing that. Ken, what do you have coming up next? What is your current goal and aspiration?
Oh, my next goal? Well, I just shot this jazz concert for like a 250-year celebration of the city, Harrisburg.
So you're a historian as well.
I've definitely recorded quite a bit of music, and I enjoy doing these podcasts. I feel like we create 3 to 6 hours of content a week, so that takes a lot time and energy, and
Well, congratulations on that. I love jazz so much that I turned one of my restaurants into a jazz club, and we had live jazz 6 nights a week. And I got to meet some great musicians, hear some great music. And I would sit on my patio, have an old fashioned, and listen to jazz all night. It was a rough life.
That's terrible.
Sounds terrible.
Terrible time.
Yeah.
Awful.
All right, so here's the secret to that I mentioned in card games, role-playing games, and D&D. How do you end this shit?
We do this. We need an aphorism, a joke, which no one ever tells jokes when I ask this question. Last statement, words of wisdom, a song.
Me. What you're looking for, some sort of entertainment value out of me? I haven't given you enough.
If you can provide.
So for business or entertainment, failures are the stepping stones to success. It was written by Emmett Stone in his book, Think and Grow Rich. I recommend it to anybody interested in excelling their own lives. It's not a recent book. It came out in the 60s, but it's really teaches you a lot. And as far as a joke, as I mentioned, I'm very good on stage. I've emceed thousands of shows. I emceed my own TV shows and concerts, and I can get a crowd to laugh, but I never wrote material. But I always believed in having one clean joke and one dirty joke. And my
Sweet.
Yeah, it just, for party situations. And so my clean joke is a hunter is going through the forest, and he's got a dead deer over his one shoulder, and he's got his rifle over the other, and he's marching through the woods, but it's not deer season. And out from behind a tree pops a ranger and says, "Hey, what's that on your shoulder?" He goes, "Well, that's my 12-gauge gun that I used to protect myself in the forest." And the ranger goes, "No, your other shoulder." And he goes, "Ah." Didn't say they were good jokes.
Well,
awesome.
Thank you.
What's the dirty joke?
I couldn't share that. Pretty bad. But it's been a real pleasure being on your marathon show. We've talked about just about everything. I learned a little bit about gaming. I was in a game. How cool is that? We're all on the same page when it comes to quality bourbon. And we learned a little bit about Ken and his therapy needs. I think it's been a real worth project, and I am honored and thankful to be on. Thank you, gentlemen.
Yeah, thank you for being on. This is the Geeky Gamer Podcast, hosted by Bill and Ken. We do this every Thursday at exactly 3 p.m.
3 p.m. Eastern Standard. We are never late.
Never
are
late.
We early?
Nope. The exact time is always there. All lowercase letters. Mr. Interp brings us the score. The art media on this podcast is created by Couchfire Media, and Trois Replay Productions does a lot of shit, but we don't know what it is. We're not
really sure what they.
As well as we do have a Patreon for the Geeky Gamer Podcast, which is Patreon/Geeky Gamer Podcast.
It's patreon.com/Geeky Gamer Podcast.
I mean, you just go to the Patreon. And then that's where we're at. So thank you very much.
We hope you enjoyed listening, everybody.
And if you didn't, you could turn it off.
That's right.
Yeah, we discussed that, didn't we?